All right, back with another edition of What Do They Do During the Off Season. And this time, we over here talking about the good old fashioned Warriors. Now, they're going to have a lot of decisions to make, to be honest. I think they're one of the more intriguing ones right now at this point. Uh, but I think the biggest thing that they got to really figure out, really, to be honest, in order to get some things going, is what they need to really do to get off or get rid of Kuminga. Like, I was like, the trade for whatever superstar, which I'll get to in a minute, really, I feel like only can really work once they actually officially decide to get rid of Kuminga. And I was like, look, there to me, I was like, they got to situate this whole thing, nip it in the bud. I was like, they have been off and on with him like so many times throughout the years that it's kind of like at this point he's a restricted free agent. He's up for a contract. He's not gonna get the max. But I was like, do a team pull an offer on him? Do Golden State match it? Do Golden State do some type of signing trade? If they're gonna have to, they want somebody. So it's like, but they need to figure out what they're gonna do, especially because it's like he wasn't getting any burn for like during the season. It was like off and on. They're trying to in order to see if someone would take him. Not really. They're playing with his emotions, all this stuff. And then in the part, once they got Jimmy Butler, it kind of was like shut down from there. I was like, yeah, I know he got like a little hurt in the playoff, but he still played or whatever the hurt was during that time. And he was able to put up buckets. I was like, I don't think he really fits. Obviously, they don't think that he fits with whatever they're trying to do. I don't also think they fit with them as long as they're still trying to keep Steph Curry where they're at of like, lo, we got Steph Curry, we built everything around him and stuff like that. I just don't think it's really feasible for him to stay there and try to develop how he thinks he should be getting to while also being there with that type. Because I was like, it just doesn't work. It doesn't match. I was like, also, Kuminga still is really, really young. So it's like he hadn't really had a chance to really develop how they wanted to. And I feel like they ain't really put behind him like how they did with Jordan Poole in order to get him to where he needed to be. And I was like, I don't think they get that same back into Kuminga in order to see where he should be, to where it's like, could he be like your next person or whatever? Like they also had Wiggins there at the time too. That was like, even though Wiggins wasn't producing, he still is there as like another option in front. Klay Thompson, another option in front. So there's still a lot of people in the way. I was like, they were really high on pause. That sort of was also in the way, but not also in the way. I know they play different positions, but I was like, that's just another chain of like the whole thing. They didn't really trot them out too much as a six man as much. They tried a bit, but they just sort of gave up, and then they'll be like, oh, we're playing everybody. Then they stopped, So I think that's where they need to start, while also just trying to figure out solidifying. I was like, and I think they did a good job of that once they got Jimmy and got towards the to the playoffs of like, who are these going to be, these guys that's going to be, where it's like Buddy Hield, Paz. I was like, they got to figure out what they're going to do with their center position as well too, because they got a lot of big men, and it's like, okay, do you need to get an actual big guy, or do you like keep developing some of these younger people, which they track regular developing young people. So I was like, do you trade some of that for like veteran players, an actual solid big man? Had Post, I was like, they still got Kevon Looney. I think he had to be thrown in if they're going to trade for somebody. So I was like, they had that mix of work. Moody, I think he sort of came on and they started using him more as like the defender type. I feel like his shot has sort of not improved in the way that would be like. But once again, I feel like there's another situation where he was part of that 2 timeline thing where it was Kuminga, him, and James Wiseman. And I was like, Moody sort of was able to carve out more of a role than they was. But also, I was like, he also been hindered a bit too, because I was like, they also was playing with his stuff a while. Because I was like, there was a time where I was like, where he was sometimes getting playing time, I was like, he could just go on like a little, like he's streaky, but I was like, he could just go on a stretch. And sometimes it's like, oh man, they just gave him more run. Could he actually develop into a more consistent? Because to me, I was like, oh man, how would they got Buddy Hield for could that just be Moody with like have a better chance of also playing defense than Buddy? But to me, I really feel like they rather just sort of go with veterans. So I'm like, at this point, if you're going to sort of go all in on Steph Curry's last part, do you just want to bring the package up some of these young dudes and just be like, all right, we're done. The future is just going to be whatever the future is. Right now, we're going to go in. But I think that all starts with figuring out what you're going to do with Kuminga. Now, once you do that, where do you go from here? The thing is, I was like, they're in the market basically where people are talking about like Giannis. I think if Giannis goes there, I think him and Stephen Curry is a better fit than him and Dame, because Dame needs the ball in his hand just as much as Giannis does. Steph doesn't need the ball in his hand like that. And Steph moves around so much, and he is such a gravitational pull because he can still shoot the lights out in a way that I'm like, Dame does, but I'm like, the way that Dame plays ball is not the same way that Curry does, in the way that I'm like, Giannis is a better fit. Now, that's where things get tricky, because it's like, I've seen like the package that you had to do had to be Jimmy Butler, and I'm like, I was like, I think if you trade Jimmy Butler to get Giannis, I was like, I think you're sort of still in the same spot, to be honest. I was like, now if you are able to get Giannis with Butler, Draymond, and just be like, forget it, we're just going to have a maxed out crew, now we're talking. Now we're doing something. Because I was like, those old guys got a young dude. I was like, Giannis is still young, especially comparing the NBA standard. But I was like, he keeps himself in good shape. I was like, he doesn't really miss games like that either. And I was like, but this is sort of, if you are going to do the old model of team building, do you want whoever is going to be one or two, you want someone there that's going to be there either majority of all the time, or be able to take over if the other star's not there. That's sometimes what doesn't work when it's like a big three or something like that. It's like the drop off for that number two might be so far, or that number three be so far that it's a problem, like with Phoenix. Or with Philly, I was like, not only did they not have good seasons, but the injuries was like, who is here to take over and be here while the other one's out? Nobody. That's all it was. So I was like, Giannis would solve all that, because I was like, Jimmy sort of does miss time during the season lately, as he's been in a little bit of the older portions of his year. Draymond had a tendency to do something. I was like, get suspended or whatever off the court. Stephen Curry also, either I was like, we'll get a little bit of knickknacks here. I was like, or as you sort of seen this year, where it's like, we're just running him ragged because we got to operate so much around him. And you sort of see like, he still is such a center of yes, he still is the center of the team. But at this point in his career, he can't be the total guy. And also, we've seen it in most of his career too, that if it's just really just him and everything has to be used around him, it's a lot. While Jimmy helped that during the regular season and the playoffs, I think his injury really did hurt a lot of the situation. I was like, we still sort of seeing like, yeah, but it's still a lot for Steph Curry even at this juncture. So having somebody like Giannis to take that whole part off would be good if they can keep him. That's where it comes with Kuminga. Like if someone, or if you give Kuminga nearly a max contract, and then you package in something like Looney and some of all these other dudes or whatever, you might be able to do it, and then just keep some of these people on the fringes. I was like, you might still be able to like keep a Buddy Hield, but Pod's got to go, Moody got to go. I was like, I already said Looney. I was like, Jackson, I was like, he's a young guy you could throw into the whole thing. I was like, so you still gonna have to piece together some things to make it work. But I was like, is it possible? I don't put it out of Golden State for them to try that. Now, outside of like that big swing that I don't think is going to happen, I do think that they will probably try to figure out. I think they might just try to do the route of like, see if you like get Kuminga to go somewhere and be like, all right, well, if he's going here, who can we bring back? There's some more veteran pieces to help or whatever. And that's sort of where it gets a little bit tricky. I was like, you need a center. I was like, sometimes the problem is with like some of the players, like the one that would make the best sense, to be honest, but I was like, I don't know if they could do it. Because I was like, I think that rather than getting Giannis like a big swing like that, I'm not saying if you can do it, do it. But I'm saying if you can get like 3 very good veteran pieces for to swap out. Like, for instance, he's going to be a free agent, so he could just sign with whomever. But Miles Turner for Golden State works really well. I was like, a 5 and I could shoot the 3, so I was like he could space out just as much. I was like he could play with Draymond. I was like he's ran in a little faster in a fast-paced offense. I was like he'll have the opportunity to just shoot. I was like he could play with Jimmy Butler as well, so you got another shooter out there as well. I was like, but he can also play defense with Draymond, so it's like it worked. And I was like, you don't have to just rely on a small ball lineup as much as they still have to at this juncture. The Warriors tandem, I guess, at this point. But I was like, I think they need another point guard. That's what I think that's what they also missed in the playoffs, was that they didn't have another point guard. Not necessarily a ball handler, because Paz can bring up the ball and he could run a little bit of point. I was like, yes, Jimmy Butler could do a little bit of, I would like play point and distribute the ball as well too. But I do think they needed another point guard / guard that like once can spell Curry and like far as like scoring acts, because I think they need another scoring guy, but also just someone also to run the offense when it's just like, because like yes, you got Draymond and you got Jimmy, but I was like, but you still sort of seeing like with their team and how many of the other dude couldn't like get a shot, or like like you're like, yeah, Pod could go off every now and then, but he's streaky. I was like, I don't know, I already talked about Moody and him not really producing an offense. Who else you getting offense that's not in the starting unit? So you need somebody that can also score and also position those dudes to also get shots or get better shots as well. And I was like, that's what sort of sucked when I think they had to trade away Dennis Schroeder, is because I was like, I thought he was playing pretty well for him, and I think that he would have came in handy not only in the playoffs, because I was like he got a lot of playoff under his belt. I was like he can guard. I was like, where it's like you had like outside of Curry, who does really well with like playing defense as with like the team. I was like, you would have Schroeder, you would have Draymond, Jimmy, or whatever. I was like Moody or whatever. Like you would have enough people that's like, oh, okay, they could also all play defense individually. And Schroeder also was like on like a scoring tear this year as well too, from Brooklyn to Golden State. Then he went to Detroit and helped them out as well too. So I was like, that was cool that he was there, but they didn't keep him obviously. But that's sort of what I'm like looking at that they need to do as well with their team. I was like, now do they try to go for a cheaper person? I was like, he didn't have really the season, but I was like, nobody did on the Phoenix Suns. But I was like, Tyus Jones. I was like, I just don't think that he has lost what he did when he was in Minnesota to even Washington. That all of a sudden, I was like, that he got that 1 year, like, veteran minimum contract or whatever. He didn't get the big money. I was like, I blame that more on the apron than anything. But I was like, I think that he could play with the team. I was like, him for a second unit, I think would be fairly well. I was like, because at this point, then you're like looking at like what a Cameron Payne or whatever like that, of like, we're talking about like backup guards. There's always like a Brogdon out there as well. So I was like, there is guards to get, but I think they also need to look at big man. I said Miles Turner. I think a Clint Capella could work, because I was like, he's big enough in stretches. I was like, you wouldn't be able to play him. I was like, you could play him and Draymond for a spell. I was like together, but I was like, you got Jimmy, Draymond, and Clint. That's too much of like clogging in the paint. You will be like, you in the West, you do need big, so it will make sense from that idea. I was like, now the one I think they could do that I'd be more intrigued with is two different people of Utah, Walker Kessler and Lauri Markkanen. Now, Walker Kessler just fits the big mode or whatever like that you can sort of play at. He's young enough as well that it's like, oh, okay, cool. I was like, I feel like, depending on how Golden State want to feel, I feel like Utah will be like, cool, we'll take Kuminga for either one of them. Of course, you got to give them some picks and maybe another person. They wasn't willing to give up Pozinski last year, but now do they sort of feel like they can? You know what I'm saying? So... And plus, Utah also got some other pieces other than Kessler, because I was like, to make the money all work too. I was like, you have Kessler, or Lauri Markkanen, but they also got like Colin Sexton, who I think will help also on Golden State, playing defense as well too, and an attacking guard. You know, I was like, especially when they struggled, like, you know, also like getting inside and stuff like that. And I was like, he's done. I was like, now that I'm over here watching the Utah Jazz and stuff like that, but it seemed like he got his shot a little bit better than when he was in Cleveland and stuff. I was like, they still got Clarkson, who I was like, I think, but I was like, that's too much. Almost fighting with Buddy Hield in a sense as well. But I was like, they got players over there that you could sort of take away. That's like also veterans or whatever. Lowry, I was like, I like because he still is young enough. I think he fits the system. You can play him and Draymond at the same time. He is 7 feet. I was like, he is somebody that you can rely on to be there, because I was like, the only reason he doesn't do anything, I was like, in Utah, they pull him out for games where they're not even playing them so they can suck. So I was like, you can't look at that. So I was like, he would fit into their whole spot. And I was like, you can basically give him for Kuminga. Yeah, like I said, you got to give him a little extra in that sense. So I was like, I think to me, I'd rather go those moves of like I said, if you can get Giannis, I think it still keep Jimmy, sure. But if you have to give Jimmy up, but you can get Larry Marketing, and it fits in a lot better because he's not going to be making the same thing as Giannis. I was like, I think that's the route I would go with. It still fits in your philosophy. I was like, he's a shooter, so as he doesn't clog up none of the paint, I was like, I think he's gotten better at getting his own shot. Like, I'm not saying that he over here about to. He ain't about to do all that. He ain't about to be over here crossing up folks. But I was like, but he can do a good amount of like step, dribble, shoot kind of thing. I was like, you could play him with Draymond in a way where you still. I was like, he's 7 feet, so I think that still works. That's the route I would want to go, unless you are able to build out enough of these vets to build a strong enough team to get you through the season. Because like I said, all three of them get hurt or they miss games in some type of way, and that's what they got to sort of figure out. Anyway, what do you think the Warriors should do? Does it start with Kuminga, or does it start with being like, do we want to swing big on another player? You know, whatever. They're trying to maximize Curry's last years. Screw it. Like what did I like LA say? Fuck them picks. Nobody needs them. Who cares? Nobody worry about that. They got enough money there that they ain't got to worry about any of that stuff. But anyway, let me know what y'all think. Till then, peace. I'm out.